My name is Bethany Osborne, and I have the privilege of being the professor for this course and creative empowerment with the disenfranchised. And I'm just going to share a few slides. And let me just share the screen with you. Okay, I'm going to share. This first slide here is actually a picture from downtown East Vancouver, and you'll have a chance to encounter some case studies from some of the populations of focus from this course. There are some exciting things that have emerged out of some of the populations of focus for this course, and we'll look at some of the work that's come out of downtown East Vancouver over the course of the next number of weeks. And so this is just one image for the downtown East Side social justice zone for one of their actions. So just starting out, today we're going to look at just some welcome and introductions, look at the course structure and the course design, and creating a space that honors people in learning, look at some preliminary course concepts, and then look at the synchronous session for week one. So, as I said before, my name is Bethany Osborne, and I have the privilege of being the professor for this course. A couple of things about me. I received my PhD in adult education and community development from OISE in 2014. I actually did my master's in the same department and in the collaborative program in women and gender studies. And I've been working as a full-time faculty member at Sheridan College since 2015. I've lived in a lot of different places over the vast years of my life, including Bangladesh, Austria, the US, and many different parts of Canada. Toronto has figured significantly into my life, and but for the past 5 years, I've actually lived in Hamilton. I've taught at various institutions of higher education since 2006, and had the opportunity to teach courses all the way from the diploma level to graduate level courses, and really enjoy teaching. In addition to teaching, I'm actively engaged in both research and in community-based projects, and some of the common threads that are a part of both my academic research and in community-based projects and activism are that they often have some kind of arts-based output and involve finding some strategic ways to amplify systemically excluded populations and voices. I took this course when I was an MA student at OISE with Dr. Bonnie Burstow, who very sadly passed away in January 2020. And Bonnie Burstow, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to read any of her work or to encounter her, was a very passionate anti-psychiatry scholar, one of the foremost scholars in North America and possibly the world. You'll have an opportunity to meet her in this course through some of her writing and through her passion and intent, which continues to be infused in this course. I'm really delighted to welcome you to this course, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know you and to learning with you through this course. One of the things that I would love for you to do, if you haven't already done it, is I would love for you to participate in the introductory activity that I've included in uh, in in the course. I created a Padlet, um, and I've explained that in the tools that are connected to the course, which is in how this course works, which is the first module in um, on Quercus. And you'll see a connection to this in on the front page of week 1. And I've also included it in the a number of places on week 1 as well. And the introductory activity provides you with an opportunity to provide your name, your preferred pronouns, and why this course was of interest to you, why you chose to take this course when you could have taken a whole variety of courses within the program, and what you would like to actually learn from this course. And the image that I provided here at the side, I actually chose very specifically because I was thinking about the fact that because of the pandemic, we're all in this space where we, whether we wanted to or not, are in this remote learning and this online learning environment. Maybe for you, a remote learning or an online learning environment really connects well to where you're at. Maybe you're finding it challenging to be in a remote or an online learning environment. But what I liked about this image is that there are these people skydiving. I'm not sure if you've ever been skydiving. I have not, and I'm not sure that I ever will go skydiving in my life. I have a student who is a skydiver, a former student who always encouraged me to go skydiving and who thinks it's the best thing in the world. I'm not sure that she has completely convinced me, but what I like about this is that you have some people that are floating away, but they're all finding ways to connect to each other before they head on to the next part of the journey and their parachutes release. And despite the fact that we are all in different spaces and places in our home offices or bedrooms or living rooms, wherever it is that you are connecting from, that there are places of connection. And I've tried to, in creating this course, to create different spaces and places for you to connect with each other and for you to connect with me. And it's my hope that we will find places for connecting with learning and for connecting with each other throughout this course. So a couple of notes about course structure. So you'll notice that throughout the course syllabus and throughout the course structure in the different modules that I've put into the course, I've used the terms asynchronous and synchronous. You may be familiar with these terms. Maybe these terms are new for you. For the way that I would define, for me, I would define asynchronous is asynchronous work is work that you would do on your own time. And for this course, it would be work that you complete in the week before the Monday night of our class. And so, for example, when you see week 2 and our class is on Monday the 18th, that means that the asynchronous work and the readings should be completed before class, because the activity for that week actually is going to be connected to our conversation on the 18th. And it will include a lecture that actually synthesizes the readings and then we'll actually do something active that connects and applies the theoretical work that we're working through that particular week. And then the synchronous work that we're doing is a term that refers to in real time, and that will be every Monday from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And this will include interactive activities and or guest speakers. And there will be 5 sessions over the course of the next 12 weeks where we'll actually have guest speakers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes when I talk about the course design. So in the asynchronous time, the time that you will be working through at your own pace, there'll be modules each week, and there'll be a recording of a lecture like this one, a setting of the context, which may also include some additional small videos, possibly some additional text that will help to set the context, maybe an interactive activity. So that will include each week a Padlet discussion board and some questions that will be connected to the readings, possibly a Google Jamboard, and that will be contextualized as well in the setting of the context. Links to the readings for that week as well. And I'll make sure that that content is posted at least 1 week in advance. I could have gone through and posted everything in advance, except that I feel like I want to be able to be responsive to our conversations in the class as well, and the conversations that happen on discussion board. And so if I created all of the content all in advance, then that wouldn't be able to be responsive. So I will make sure that content for each week is posted at least 1 week in advance, possibly a little bit more in advance, and I'll make sure that you know when you're able to access the content. But I want to be able to also be responsive to our conversations as well, and to change up as we move forward, and to respond to our conversations. Our synchronous sessions will be on Zoom. And it will be from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And as I talked about, there will be interactive discussions and activities or guest speakers. And I'm also open to, and we'll talk about this in week 1, to providing space to meet more informally in the half hour before or half hour after as well, depending on the what would be helpful in terms of office hours, if that's useful. I used to always love in face-to-face classrooms coming early to class and having those informal connections. And so that is also possible in time before class or after class on Zoom as well. So some of the highlights, just to make you aware of. One of the things is take a look at the course syllabus. It is not meant to be overwhelming, the fact that it is 25 pages long. OISE changed the structure of the course syllabus to make sure that it was a very comprehensive document. And I'm actually really impressed with all of the information that's included on that course syllabus to make sure that it's kind of a one-stop shop for you. There are hyperlinks to and a table of contents, so you can take a look at it. And I made sure that in addition to all of the pieces that are included on the course syllabus, that I also included links to all the readings and all of the information about the different pieces of the course and brief descriptions of the assignments as well, so that it was really not one-stop shopping for you, so that you didn't have to access many different documents to have all of your information. So it is a 25-page document, but it does have everything that you need in the document, and it does have hyperlinks, and so you're able to access that on Quercus. There are a few tools that we'll be using in the course, and I provided in the first module how the course works, small tutorials on how to use those different tools. So those different tools are Padlet and Google Jamboard and Mentimeter. And so I provided little tutorials. If you're having any trouble at all with any of those tools, please reach out to me, and I'm really happy to connect with you and to support you in using those tools. In terms of the readings, I've included required readings and also recommended readings. And the required readings are the only readings that you're required to read. But I always think that it's helpful to have recommended readings as well. And for your different assignments, it's a place for you to get started on the different topic areas that you'll be looking at. And so that's those are provided for you as well. So feel free to connect in with those different readings as well. In terms of guest speakers, the interest in having guest speakers in the course, your readings will provide you with an opportunity to connect with that counter-hegemonic perspective. And so that's the perspective of those populations of focus that we have in the course. It's really important that my voice is not the only voice that you hear, because I don't represent all of those different populations of focus. And so I've connected with a number of different people who do represent those different populations of focus, and they'll be coming to speak to you to talk about those different the different movements and the different populations of focus from their perspective. And you'll notice that assignment number 1 is actually connected to those guest speaker visits or guest speaker sessions. And I'll talk a little bit about assignment number 1 and assignment number 2 just in a few minutes. But the presence of guest speakers is really important in the course, to ensure that you get to hear many voices and perspectives. In terms of making connections, I talked before with that image of those skydivers about the importance of making connections. And we don't have the opportunity of sitting around a classroom together, but there are various ways that you can make connections. One way is through the Padlet discussion boards. Another way is through connecting and the connection between the asynchronous and the synchronous learning. And I've made sure that in each week of our sessions, there are going to be significant connections between the asynchronous and synchronous sessions. And there will also be opportunities to make virtual connections as well. So I encourage you to make connections. There will be opportunities for virtual drop-ins throughout the semester, and we'll talk a little bit about that in our first synchronous session about how that works best for people. But I would encourage you to think about reaching out and connecting and attending drop-in sessions as well. Course assignments. There are 2 course assignments in the course. Assignment number 1, which are reflection or synthesis papers, and they're worth 50% of the final mark, and it's 2 papers that are worth 25% each. And those papers are due on March 28th, and they are based on, like I explained a little bit earlier, on those guest speaker sessions. And you'll have the opportunity to choose to respond to 2 of the 5 guest speaker sessions, and to reflect on them and to connect those into the to course readings and course content. And you can submit them at any time during the semester, but the final deadline to submit those papers is the 28th of March. You have lots of choice. I always think choice is a good thing. You can find detailed descriptions, including a video description on Quercus under the how this course works, and please reach out to me if you've got any questions. Assignment number 2 is actually a consciousness raising project, and it's also worth 50% of your final mark. And this is a project in which you will can either connect with, if you're someone who is already connected into one of the populations of focus in this course, you can connect with one of those, with that population or with that group. Or if you're someone who doesn't already have a pre-existing relationship or connection, you can choose to attend an event or participate in an action. And in both cases, you will be either participating in an action or event, or responding to an action or event that you have participated in, and creating a creative or arts-based project that is raising awareness about an issue that is connected into that particular population of focus. And there are a few parts involved with assignment number 2. The first part is a proposal piece that is due on March the 7th. And then there's the attending of the event, and then the actual creative or arts-based project, and then there's a reflection. And you can find a detailed description of that assignment, including also a video on Quercus, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that assignment as well. One of the things that's really important as we think about starting our time together is for us to establish from the beginning a space that honors everyone in the class and honors their learning. There are a few policies that I just want to highlight that are described in detail on the course syllabus. The first policy is actually one that is on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and you can find that on page 23 of the course syllabus. And it states that at the University of Toronto, we strive to be an equitable and inclusive community, rich with diversity, protecting the human rights of all persons, and based upon the understanding and mutual respect for the dignity and worth of every person. We seek to ensure the greatest extent possible that all students and employees enjoy the opportunity to participate as they see fit in the full range of activities that the university offers, and to achieve their full potential as members of the university community. Our support for equity is grounded in an institution-wide commitment to achieving a working, teaching, and learning environment that's free from discrimination and harassment as defined in the Ontario Human Rights Code. In striving to become an equitable community, we'll also work to eliminate, reduce, or mitigate adverse effects of barriers to full participate in university life that we find, including physical, environmental, attitudinal, communication, or technological. And you'll see that there are a number of links that are associated with that as well. There are some reminders that are included in that as well, that as we are in this online environment and are participating in a virtual learning environment, that we all need to demonstrate respect for one another, and as is outlined in the Student Code of Conduct. That the University of Toronto recognizes commitment to human rights, equity, and inclusion, and acknowledges the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 has had on various parts of our community, and that COVID-19 is not isolated to people of any particular ethnic origin, place of origin, or race, and that equity, diversity, and respect must remain integral as we continue to transition during challenging times. And the institution will monitor and address discriminatory comments or behavior, including on U of T's online platforms and classrooms. In accordance with Ontario Human Rights Code, no person shall engage in a course of vexatious conduct that is directed at one or more specific individuals, that is based on race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age, marital status, family status, disability. And this includes racial slurs or jokes, insults due to racial identity, online posts of cartoons or pictures in a workplace or school that degrades persons of a particular racial group, name calling due to race, color, citizenship, place of origin, ancestry, ethnic background, or creed, pseudonyms or handles that are inappropriate about ancestry, color, citizenship, ethnicity, place of origin, race, or discrimination. There's included on that link more prohibited grounds for discrimination as well that are part of the Human Rights Code. There's also an additional section just on accessibility and accommodation on page 24. It's important to know that in this course, access and accommodation are understood as a right that's protected by Canadian and international law, and that services provided to registered recipients by OISE and U of T accessibility services, and by any other service providers. And it's a process that requires continuous conversation and learning. And that in this classroom, we're adopting a number of access practices, that videos will be closed captioned, and we'll try to use live captioning where possible for synchronous sessions, and present content in multiple modes. And whenever possible, I'll provide transcripts for video recordings as well. And if there's anything else that I can do to make your learning experience a good learning experience, or anything else that you need for this experience to be a good learning experience for you, please send me an email and I'm happy to discuss that with you. What I'm interested in knowing from you is what is important for you in actually creating a space that honors people and honors learning. And I would love for you to actually contribute to the Padlet discussion board for week 1. And I've asked that very question. I've asked a question about if you have any questions about the content for week 1, but I've also asked the question about creating a space that honors people and learning. And we'll continue the conversation in our synchronous time, but would love it if you would actually contribute to the conversation before we meet together on Monday, the 11th. So next on our agenda is actually the course description. So the course has actually been designed to be of interest to people from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. So people like activists, counselors, crisis workers, shelter workers, harm reduction workers, advocates, literacy workers, popular educators, community theater practitioners, political artists, critical social workers, and the list goes on. The context in which is actually offered is a world that's increasingly populated by disenfranchised people, and the need for more aware, more versatile, more strategic, and more creative practitioners. The course has 2 primary purposes: to support people engaged or who would like to be engaged with disenfranchised populations gain a fuller understanding of the populations, and to become more skilled and creative as allies and activists, and to explore key community development and social activism principles using the realities of disenfranchised populations, including their fit or misfit with the populations. There'll be a special emphasis on Gandhi-style activism on one hand, and on current anarchist-style activism as is manifested in phenomenon like the Occupy movement on the other. And a balance will be struck between strategic activism and arts-based activism. And the course addresses a number of disenfranchised and highly overlapping populations. The focal groups are people who have been psychiatrized, people who are homeless, people who have been imprisoned, people who use illicit drugs, and there's an auxiliary emphasis on people who are undocumented and sex trade workers. And there's an emphasis on both these groups in their particularity, but also on the overlaps and the commonalities with the meaning that this holds for praxis. This is a counter-hegemonic course. So the vantage points and the concerns of this group in question are the starting point, and their rights are actually paramount. It's grounded in respect for disenfranchised people, for the solutions that are forged, for the cultures that are created, and the communities formed. It's grounded in an understanding of the role of the state and of global elites in the creation and exacerbation of human problems. Correspondingly, it's actually grounded in an understanding of the centrality of systemic oppressions, such as classism, racism, sexism, heterosexism, and ableism. And primary theoretical frameworks include feminism, anti-racism, Marxism, critical theory, transformative justice, labeling theory, anti-psychiatry, social anarchism, existentialism, and the philosophies of nonviolent activism. Some of the questions that will be co-investigated include: how, who, and why does the state disenfranchise? What modifications are needed in community organizing with populations at risk from the state? And what are some of the ways that arts have been effectively used by movements in question? And the primary focus is the liberatory movements of the communities in question. So for example, the penal abolition movement, or the anti-psychiatry movement, the harm reduction movement, the anti-poverty movement. And a particular pivotal question is how to advance the goals of the movements in question. And strategic activism is particularly emphasized. So learners will learn the ABCs of good strategizing, and beyond that, gain the fuller understanding of what resistance strategies have worked and what have not worked in these movements, and what the unique challenges of advocacy and community organizing are with respect to these specific populations. There'll also be an emphasis on the creation and use of many different forms of art explored, including political art, expressive art, witness art, popular education. And some of the examples of art forms will be that will be explored will include theater, including theater of the oppressed, puppetry, photography, creation of documentaries, and storytelling. So the populations of focus, as I just shared, the focal populations are people who have been psychiatrized, people who are homeless, people who have been imprisoned, people who use illicit drugs, and then with an auxiliary emphasis on people who are undocumented and sex trade workers. And as we begin our conversation and look at different people who have been disenfranchised by the state, acknowledge that there are a number of different people who have been disenfranchised by the state. And you may identify that there are different groups of people who have been disenfranchised by the state who aren't included in this group. So for example, one of the groups that I identify in the asynchronous part when I set the context is that Indigenous peoples are not mentioned as a population that has been disenfranchised by the state. And the different strategic resistance movements that have emerged out of Indigenous communities. However, I want to acknowledge first that there could be an entire course on this subject because there are many ways that Indigenous peoples are connected to the populations that are identified in this course. And two, that when we use an intersectional lens, there are many ways in which disenfranchised communities or systemically excluded populations intersect with each other. And so you'll find that throughout the course, there are case studies that illustrate the impact of systemic exclusion and disenfranchisement on different communities or on particular bodies, including Indigenous and other racialized or systemically excluded communities within the different groups that we're actually discussing in the course. And as an additional note for assignment number 2, I included a note that if there's a population that intersects with one of our populations of focus in the course, if you would like to focus on that group, you're very welcome to. So you're just check in with me about the group that you would like to focus on. So some of the course concepts that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to pick this up in our synchronous time on the 11th, is talking about the disenfranchised or disenfranchisement, so systemically excluded populations or communities, and enfranchisement, and talking about who has the power to enfranchise or to disenfranchise. And I want to also speak to the fact that language is always something that is troubling. And you might even notice that I've shifted back between using the word disenfranchised and enfranchised, but also am playing with the term systemically excluded populations and communities. And I have a level of discomfort with this idea of populations being disenfranchised because somehow it feels like that groups it's somehow putting a focus on a deficit model rather than a strength-based model. And we will talk about that more on the 11th, but I'm favoring more even using language that's talking about systemically excluded populations, because it's actually talking about a system that excludes, as opposed to speaking to and putting the focus on a group being disenfranchised and a group having a particular deficit. But these are some of the things that we're going to talk about and problematize, because I think these are important things to talk about. And the idea of even empowerment. Is empowerment the right term to use? Can you empower another person? And if you have the power to empower another person, are they truly empowered, or does a power need to emerge from within a community? Do you still have the power? Are you still maintaining a position of power if you're the one who can empower someone else? Are there other terms that we should be using, and what are those terms, and what is the language that we should be using, and is there other language to use? So these are some of the conversations that we'll have on the 11th. Some of the other concepts that we're going to talk about are hegemony and counter hegemonic, and we'll pick up these concepts in detail in week 2. And these are concepts that draw from a Marxist perspective and construction of a state, and those who are speaking from a perspective that is counter the state. And so we'll flush out the root of that and look at how that has grown from a Marxist perspective, and where that actually positions those voices, and the importance of those voices in that structure as well. The ideas of power and oppression, terms that we're all likely quite familiar with, maybe hegemony and counter-hegemonic perspectives are terms that some of you may be familiar with, others may not be as familiar with. Power and oppression are probably terms that you're much more familiar with. If you want a little bit of a reminder or a little bit of a review, I'd encourage you to check out the article in the recommended readings for week 1. If you just want a review of definitions and terms from a community-based perspective, and you can find that in the readings for week 1, that's in the module for week 1, but I've also put a link to it in the presentation as well, which you can find in week 1 as well. So moving on to the synchronous session for week 1. In this particular session, we'll spend some time getting to know each other. We'll continue the conversation about what creates a space that's honoring to people and to learning. We'll discuss the different course concepts using the Google Jamboard tool. And then we'll also create a space for questions about course structure and assignments. And I will look forward to the opportunity to getting to know each one of you over the course of this semester. And please feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions about the structure of the course, about how the asynchronous and synchronous pieces are going to fit together, about access, and or about course assignments. I'm very happy to connect with you, and wish you a wonderful semester.